Hey everybody, welcome to episode 86 of the Go Get Outside podcast. This is your host, Jason Milligan. Welcome back. Welcome aboard. Welcome to the final episode of season 4. Today's episode is special to me, and I hope all of you will enjoy it out there. I've been wanting to do this particular episode since the beginning of this podcast, and here we are, 86 episodes in, and finally it is happening. 2010 was a big year for me. It's when I left my job, became self-employed. We founded Butcherbird Studios. I started climbing and leading. I got my open water scuba certification, got my first GoPro, surfed for the first time, did my first tandem skydive, and I hiked the West Coast Trail on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. And that is what today's episode is about. This is one story told by me and Steven Calcote, who you may remember from episode 57 of this very podcast, recounting our 6 days on the West Coast Trail in British Columbia. For me, this was a very seminal moment in my development in the outdoors, and I hope a lot of you will be able to identify and pull something from this episode. But now let's go listen to Steven and I tell you all about this seminal experience in our lives, hiking the West Coast Trail. I fumble around in the twilight. My hand finds the zipper. I squeeze through the tight space between the tent opening and the adjacent rock face and into the cold sand. Before me are the remnants of our failed fire. I stand, squeeze past the tent, and inspect the clothesline. Our quick-dry clothing is still drenched. The air is too damp for anything to dry. I exit the cave and step down onto the beach. The rain has ceased for the time being. The sky is still overcast, but the rising sun is strong enough to illuminate a gray haze. A light mist rolls across my skin, and I stare out into the ocean for a bit. It's cold. I hike down the beach to a small cove where I stashed my bear canister. Still safe. Steven slides out of the cave. Time for breakfast. We sit in the sand, huddled around my tiny stove, and watch the ocean. The world is waking up. Birds fly past, waves roll in, the sun fights to be seen, and perched on a rock yards away sits a bald eagle. It watches us as we eat our modest breakfast. We laugh. In America, it is Memorial Day. As we share breakfast with a bald eagle, we realize we are having the most patriotic Memorial Day of our lives. We are in Canada. It is day 3 on the West Coast Trail. A few years ago, I realized my life wasn't headed in the direction I wanted. I was coasting. I had become complacent. When I imagined my life had I lived in centuries past, I liked to think I would have been an explorer, boldly trekking across newly discovered wild lands. Yet little in my present life lent credence to that thought. Other than moving across country, struggling to find a living, and taking public transportation across Los Angeles, there hadn't been much adventure in my life for years. At least not the kind I longed for. I knew I needed to make some big changes, and I struggled to decide what those changes should be. Suddenly, fate intervened. My greatest fear came to pass. My great-grandmother died. She was an old Cuban lady who spoke very little English, yet somehow communicated with everyone despite that. Instead of her real name, everyone called her Mima, which essentially means mother. My family had lost its collective maternal figure. Nothing makes life seem more precious than death. Shortly after, I instituted several changes in my life, including ending an 8-year relationship with my then-girlfriend that was being held together by familiarity and convenience. It was time for big changes and time to evaluate my life. As I became more proactive in my choices, I found myself finding more successes in all aspects of my life, business and personal. One of the decisions I had made was to integrate adventure back into my life. Hiking, backpacking, climbing, rafting, and other outdoor pursuits became a priority. The more time I spent in nature, the more I learned about myself. It was making me stronger physically, emotionally, and psychologically. When I read about the West Coast Trail in British Columbia, I knew it was a chance to push myself further.
I actually don't remember. I believe it was Jason who found this trail that he was really excited about, called the West Coast Trail.
I can tell you where I found it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you know those adventure books are like 365 days of adventure or adventures all over the globe in 200 pages or whatever. Oftentimes they devote 2 to 3 pages to an activity. In the back matter of one of the months was a very small description of the West Coast Trail, and I read about it and I thought, why are there like 2 sentences devoted to this? This sounds awesome. But it said ladders, suspension bridges, and hand-operated cable cars, and surge channels, and stream crossings. And I knew, like, okay, this sounds super cool.
And I remember when you said ladders and cable cars, I stopped listening and I started imagining at that point. And it seemed the very much needed polar opposite of where we found ourselves, on a rutted path in an office environment that was going to be day after day of the same, with the same challenges and the known frustrations ahead.
The last few years had been going well, but the time for drastic change was coming yet again. I decided to quit my job and embark on the path of full-time self-employment. But first, I would go to Canada. What better way to baptize a new path than the West Coast Trail? My friend and coworker Steven was also quitting for similar reasons and agreed to meet me in Victoria, Canada. Together, we would face the WCT before putting our individual professional lives back together. The West Coast Trail runs 75 kilometers, that's roughly 48 miles, down the western coast of Vancouver Island from Pachena Bay to Port Renfrew. It is known for brutal storms and a history of disastrous shipwrecks. An earlier version of the trail was known as the Life-Saving Trail. Its purpose was to give survivors washed ashore a solid chance of making it to civilization alive. Now, it's a week-long backpacking challenge for those who want to experience beauty and hardship in the Canadian wilderness. The descriptions I read of the WCT excited the adventurer inside me. Suspension bridges, miles of mud pits, hand-operated cable cars, surging tides, river crossings, dozens of tall ladders, rocky beaches, and unpredictable weather. I knew the trail would be both fun and miserable. I expected both. My secret hope, although, was for an epiphany along the way. I spent a week in BC with my girlfriend Erica before starting the trail. The weather had been typical for the region. Wet. No day passed without some rain. Weather reports expected the rain to continue.
So Vancouver is this incredibly beautiful city. It's very much a world city. And then you leave that behind to find transportation to the island over the water. Each step of the way, there's less and less civilization. It's a wonderful transition because you have the opportunity to get into the experience.
The WCT is a maintained trail composed of many man-made bridges and walkways in various stages of decay. Some portions look as if they had been erected only hours before. Other portions are so rotten and beaten, they actually make the trail more dangerous.
The land wanted to take this stuff back pretty quickly.
One could assume the WCT is an easy hike because of the various structures along the way. Many people make this mistake each season and are evacuated. A whiteboard in the ranger station displays the current number at all times in red marker. During orientation, it is repeatedly stressed that the trail is intended only for experienced backpackers. One forewarned, if it keeps raining like this, it'll be the toughest trail in North America.
I was actually quite surprised that this bus was navigating these old, rutted-out logging roads.
Rain continued to fall as Steven and I rode the shuttle bus 5 hours down logging roads into the seclusion of western Vancouver Island. It became very clear how far we would be from help if trouble arose.
You look around you and you realize, wow, we're going to do something really remote here.
We hoped for the best and prepared ourselves for the possibility of non-stop showers.
Leaving wouldn't be easy. We really were making a commitment. we were going to have to rely on ourselves.
When we reached the trailhead, nature decided to toy with us. The sun broke free of the clouds, the day grew hot. The first 12 kilometers were a joy. We began in the woods of Pachena Bay. The lush foliage looked like something from a primordial forest in a dinosaur story. Our spirits were high. We climbed ladders, strode across bridges, and trampled through shallow mud pits while joking and admiring the majesty of the forest around us.
It gave me a sense of confidence. Oh, this is going to be hard work, but I'm going to get through this just fine.
Along the way, we visited a lighthouse and watched sea lions sun on a huge rock just offshore. The night was spent camping on the beach with others from the shuttle bus. We shared a fire with 2 friendly couples and reveled beneath the enormous blood-red full moon and clear, star-filled sky. Even sitting in the outhouse, staring out its window down onto the beach was spectacular. The best outhouse view I've ever experienced. Thus far, the West Coast Trail was a paradise. Mother Nature had given us everything we could ask for.
And then, of course, that all got taken away.
The next 4 days were filled with rain. On occasion, we would be blessed with light sprinkles, but the rain would rarely cease. Having begun in Pachena Bay, we knowingly started at the easier part of the trail. It would grow harder each day, and the rain would compound some difficulties. Everything on the WCT is slippery. The rocks, the walkways, the fallen trees known as blowdowns.
I have never been somewhere where I could trust my feet so little.
Day 2 brought our first batch of beach hikes. The sand was strenuous, the wind was strong, and the air had grown cold. As we scrambled across a rocky piece of beach, Steven slipped. His full weight and 50-pound pack landed directly on his wrist.
I had a number of terrible falls that began to take their toll, as not only my body slipped and fell, but the additional insult of a 50-pound pack came thundering down on top of me.
We were horrified. Was he okay? Would we have to turn back? Would we become another number on the whiteboard in the ranger station? Steven lay on the ground for a bit, gritting his teeth. I waited. I helped him up. He massaged his arm. It hurt, but it was okay. At worst, a sprain. We could continue. The rain fell. We walked on. Late in the day, we climbed down several ladders to the beach at Susiat Falls. A tall waterfall poured into a small stream parallel to the coast. We found a small cave and set up camp. Everything was soaked. Despite our best efforts, no wood we could find was dry enough to burn.
And I thought, wow, we're going to get this fire going, and I'm going to try out my clothes, and I'm going to warm up my body. And it felt like such a defeat.
We crawled into the tent and slept, hoping for better weather in the morning. Day 3, Memorial Day. The breakfast with the bald eagle rose our spirits.
I realized I'm looking at an apex predator. You think about that, making eye contact with the bald eagle as you're eating breakfast 10 feet away. And that was a moment where I felt like it was all right, like things were going to be okay.
As a running gag throughout the day, we sang patriotic songs, often laughing at how difficult it was to recall some of the lyrics. We didn't know it yet, but this day would be the most important of all. The trail was growing tougher and the weather was not improving. We would occasionally meet hikers coming from the opposite direction, those who started from the tougher end, our ultimate destination. They were rarely smiling and often ranting or cursing their soaked Gore-Tex.
Everything gets wet after 4 days of constant rain.
Our first great surprise of the day was an enormous fallen tree trunk where a bridge should be. The river rushing past it on either side. We forded it carefully and continued. Later, we would lose time on a nearly impassable rocky outcropping on the beach when I insisted we continue because I was trusting the map over my own eyes. Steven nearly lost his pack in a surge channel. The rain continued. We arrived at Nitnat. The Nitnat Narrows is a wide, deep river falling around kilometer marker 33. The only way to continue is to catch a small boat that operates specifically for ferrying hikers across. It is a chance to relax near a wood-burning stove, purchase a fresh salmon or crab dinner, and share stories with fellow hikers. Stories of broken stoves, a bear running wild after swallowing a case of Coca-Cola.
Well, I asked to go see where the bear had broken into the supply shed. Bears shouldn't really have 48 cans of Coca-Cola. This is officially a coked up bear.
It also allows for one other opportunity, one that all hikers know about. If you've had enough and you have money to spare, Nit-Nat is your one opportunity to leave the trail. We encountered a dozen hikers while we ate our salmon. 9 were leaving.
It had become quite miserable by this point. It was no longer fun.
The trail was only going to get tougher. The weather was not likely to improve. It could get worse. The rain could become a storm. Although neither of us spoke, I knew Steven and I were both considering the option.
I think this is important to stress. It's not like we would try to figure out some impossible evacuation scenario at that point. It was dangling in front of us. It was already arranged. These people were pulling the ripcord.
And 75% of the people there were choosing that option.
And yet, still, I didn't say anything to you.
I had come to the West Coast Trail for adventure, for a challenge, and maybe for an epiphany. I had found the first 2. The third was ever elusive. Would I still respect myself if I quit?
Could I face another day or 2 or 3? How many more times could I fall? How much would my wrist hold up?
I had planned this trip for months. It was the perfect time in my life to do it. If I quit now, would I ever return to finish it?
Would I ever forgive myself if I didn't keep going?
What would I gain by quitting? Only immediate psychological security and an opportunity for warmth, for dryness, for comfort.
And the moment that you give up the need to be comfortable, a whole new world opens up to you.
Steven and I never mentioned quitting to each other. It was as if speaking the words would imbue them with a power we couldn't defeat.
I didn't want to infect our spirit with this possibility that we wouldn't go forward.
To openly consider quitting was inviting failure. To make it the remaining 40 plus kilometers would require a fortitude we could not muster if we considered defeat.
I imagined how I would look back on things if I didn't complete it. I didn't want to face that version of myself.
We left the dock and disappeared into the swamp.
I remember thinking, I'm making too big a deal about this. This bear wants nothing to do with people. I'm sure that I'm just imagining things. And within a mile of leaving that shack, right in the middle of the trail, was a giant green pile of bear shit.
As much as like there was a somber air in this area, there's also this funny bear story going on side by side.
But it took my mind off of the rain. I remember being much focused on other things and being hyper aware of animal sounds as we went forward.
That night was both blessing and curse. We shared a campsite and fire with a young group of energetic hikers whose zeal reminded us why we were on the trail in the first place. We retired to our tents as rain began to threaten the fire. I awoke an hour later, unable to stop shivering. I stripped and slid into whatever dry clothing I had remaining. I wrapped myself in my sleeping bag and waited. Eventually, my body began to warm. In the morning, I would learn that Steven had also fought the early stages of hypothermia that night.
I had never had a time where I was cold like that and couldn't warm up.
We donned our wet clothing and moved on. It was time to see if we had made the right choice at Nit-Nat. We were not rewarded. The day consisted of never-ending rain and hiking predominantly on open, cold beaches. It was demoralizing.
Your forward progress when you step into mud that's a foot deep goes to almost zero because each step becomes a battle. Sand sucks at you and makes every step more challenging.
We did have a brief respite at Chez Monique, a small home on the trail where a family lives seasonally and sells huge burgers to hikers. Rarely have I enjoyed a burger so goddamn much. Later, when we arrived at Walburn Creek, our destination for the night, we met high tide and the river was swollen.
You're tired, the place where you want to get to is in striking distance, and the question is, just push forward and get there, or do you play it safe? And that was one of the first times that I really understood this temptation to just keep going, because you're almost there.
Our only option was to take shelter under some large pieces of driftwood while we waited for the tide to fall. It was also a great opportunity for a nap.
We had a few logs overhead. I laid down on the stones. I was cold. I was wet. I slept like the dead.
But even with the arrival of low tide, the river was too deep and strong to wade. One misstep and we'd be washed into the ocean.
Being bone tired and cold with the pack and all the clothing, getting washed out to sea at that point was probably a fatal error.
As we anxiously moved hand in hand into the river, sinking deeper into its depths, we noticed a cable car upriver ahead in the woods.
These are little two-person sized buckets.
We decided to skirt along the slick, featured rock face alongside the river until we could reach the wooded area. It was with a great sense of achievement and relief that we pulled the cable car across the river.
Cable car. That's a lot of work.
We thought for some reason that we would simply get in and we go whee all the way across. But of course, that's not how physics works. It goes whee to the middle. And then you realize you are going to have to take all of your weight hand over hand now.
Holy crap.
We slid into our tent just in time for a torrential downpour to begin. It continued throughout the night and into the morning. I was dreading the day ahead. We had not been dry in days, and it seemed likely we'd only get more drenched as we were to tackle what had been reported to be the toughest part of the trail. I awoke just before the sun. It was still pouring. I unzipped the rainfly, aimed into the downpour, and emptied my bladder. No point getting soaked before I had to. I slid back into my mummy bag and closed my eyes. Each time I awoke, I hoped the rain had stopped. It hadn't. Eventually, I fell into a deep sleep. I was floating down a dark Los Angeles street, the only light from street lamps. Apparently, my girlfriend Erica was floating alongside me because I could hear her speaking. We spoke of a number of unimportant things I can't recall. There was a break in the conversation. The sound of the rain from reality was audible in my dream. My mind was aware I was on the WCT, but not that I was dreaming. My dream mind seemed to believe I had somehow teleported back to Los Angeles. I had escaped the trail in mind since I no longer could in body. Then something strange happened. We continued floating down the street. The silence ended. Erica asked me,
"You aren't going back, are you?"
My response was immediate. I have to. I haven't finished it. My eyes shot open and a chill ran through my body. I felt this weird sensation as if some secret of the universe had been revealed to me. My mind had tried to escape, but my subconscious forced it to return. There had been a battle in my head, and I had won. It wasn't the sort of epiphany I was hoping for. I was hoping for a surge of brilliance to wash over me and illuminate the best choices for my life ahead. Some sort of roadmap to the future. This was something different. I pulled off my sleeping bag. I was tired of being trapped inside of it. I didn't want to wait any longer. I no longer feared the weather or the challenges ahead. I had found an acceptance. I could not control my environment. I could not predict it. I needed only to accept it and embrace it. That was why it was worth doing in the first place. I was filled with optimism, with determination. I was on the WCT. There was only one way out. Walking. Day 5 was the most physically demanding. The ladders were the tallest yet. One pair was over 20 stories. The mud was at its deepest. The rivers had grown so swollen they lapped at the base of some bridges. And a small waterfall had formed over one set of ladders.
The most visceral, intense memory I have is ascending one of these slippery wooden ladders as an icy, cold river of water smashes over me,
drenching Steven and I in ice-cold water. It was my happiest day on the trail. As we reached camp for the night, the sun broke free. We encountered our young friends from before and made new friends at the site. It felt like that first night on the trail. It felt like I had passed a test and was now being rewarded.
It's interesting the number of times I've begun a sentence with, Jason, you're going to be mad at me, but...
And so what you asked was, you said we have to stop because I need to eat one of my dehydrated desserts because I'm completely out of snacks at this point.
I had elected to bring a dessert for every meal, but I had not brought enough snacks. I had simply eaten too much of my food. There wasn't enough food left.
And we still had 2 days of hiking left to do.
You were very, very gracious in that you gave me some of your snacks.
I took my snacks and split it in half and handed you half of them.
So I've been eating the snacks, and I left on the log so that I could eat some more snacks after I pumped water. A crow descended from the trees.
So I gave you half of my snacks, and a crow promptly stole half of that.
Looking over at you who had made the ultimate snack sacrifice, only to discover that I had squandered it.
13 kilometers remained. Most people completed this stretch in 2 days. We decided to push through in one. Our camping friends were a bit skeptical but encouraging. There was one catch. To exit the trail at Port Renfrew requires catching a small ferry that closes precisely at 4:30 p.m. The ranger at orientation had warned us the ferryman was a stickler for time. If we missed it, we'd be forced to stay on the trail an additional night regardless. We had also been warned that some portions of the trail would eat an hour per kilometer. We'd assumed this was an exaggeration. It was not. Inching along innumerable wet fallen trees swallows a lot of time. My only worry was Steven. I had my weird dream and now was fueled by some ethereal subconscious drive. I had noticed he had grown stronger along the trail, but he was still struggling. The elevation gain and obstacles ahead were among his weaknesses. The only way we could make the 4:30 deadline was to leave with the rising sun and push through as hard as possible. No extended rests. He agreed.
We've been told right at the start that the ferry does not wait. If you are not there at the appointed time, the ferry driver won't wait for you.
So what I did is I took the remaining number of kilometers and the number of hours and half hours we had in the day, did the math in my head, and then said, we have to be at this kilometer marker at exactly this time, no later, and the next one at no later than this time. And if that meant we could only break for like 20 seconds, that's what we would do. And I watched that watch all day long.
You actually took on a challenge, which was you would be the keeper of the clock. I then only had to worry about one thing. You were doing the calculations. You knew when we needed to get to each place. I, being in this point of exhaustion and where my spirit just wasn't up, I could focus on that one thing. Your voice, your encouragement, your goal.
The weather improved. It rarely sprinkled. I tried to keep us on schedule, constantly running math through my head as we passed each kilometer marker. I pushed Steven as hard as I could, but hopefully not so hard as to be discouraging. We spent hours traversing endless blowdowns, rock hopping, and encountering more of what we'd seen before. Then, the terrain sloped upwards and the march up into the woods began. As we passed each marker, I was amazed to see we were perfectly on schedule. If we kept the same pace, we could make it just in time. The elevation continued to increase. We were getting close. Then, I heard it. A sound I'd heard a few times each day. The sound of Steven slipping. This time, it was ominous. As I turned, I saw him contort into a pretzel as he landed amongst rocks and directly onto the wrist he'd injured days before. He let out a howl. We had gotten so goddamn close.
my foot down, the ground slipped beneath me. It was a downslope, and I slipped, tripped, and tumbled, and found myself beneath my bag. One leg was behind me, another was in front. I was like a pretzel.
He lay twisted in an odd shape, lying face first on the ground for what seemed like eternity.
I honestly didn't know if I'd broken anything.
I felt guilty. Had I pushed too hard? I felt concerned. Was he okay? I felt anxious. Could we still make it in time?
And I was really aware of that clock. I was upset as much as I was hurt, especially being so close. Because after all this, was I going to force us to miss that ferry?
He slid out of his pack and massaged his forearm. I watched. He gritted his teeth and shook his arm. I waited. He screwed up a smile.
I think it's okay.
We had developed a shorthand for communicating that day. I would ask how he was doing. He would reply,
Good.
Or,
Step by step.
I looked at his arm. I watched him put on his pack.
How you doing?
Step by step. So I knew that I was not going to be able to keep the speed anymore.
Our only hope of making the 4:30 deadline was for me to hike ahead.
And see if he could hold the ferry.
I was worried about leaving Steven behind, but we agreed it was our only chance.
And that was the best option for getting out.
I was off.
I was in an incredible amount of pain, sharp retorts from each muscle and bone as I stepped. But I also felt an obligation that you had doubled down. You were trying to get there in time. I needed to buckle up.
Every few minutes I would scream into the woods.
Steven, how you doing?
Step by step.
Would echo back. I could assure myself he was okay and gauge his distance. The final kilometer seemed to continue indefinitely. Finally, around a bend I saw it, the beach. I ran to a tree at the edge, grabbed the rope, and yanked the buoy into the air to alert the ferry on the other shore. It was 4:28 p.m. I had made it. Then I noticed a small boat receding from me. The captain never looked back.
What I found when I came in to that little clearing is a look of such profound disappointment on your face.
The moment when I ran down there and grabbed the rope on the buoy and dropped to the ground and pulled up felt amazing. And then it immediately felt like the worst failure because it felt like we had tried so hard and we overcame everything and we did it, and I got there at 4:28, 2 fucking minutes before cutoff, and it wasn't good enough.
So I didn't get the triumphant moment with you. I got the look of utter devastation, and you didn't have to say anything. I knew.
Do you remember all the great things we said about the ferryman while we were waiting?
We should probably not repeat those.
Yeah, we said a lot of terrible things about this imaginary person that we hadn't even met, didn't know anything about. All we knew about this person was he was a stickler for time and he left us and he was an asshole. We waved at people on the other shore, hoping someone could help. One person yelled back at us. He ran down to the ferry dock. No one was there. I opened my bear canister and began snacking. We discussed our options. We accepted our fate.
No, that can't be. Wait, it might be. Oh my God, that's our...
A small object appeared on the water, approaching us. It grew larger. It was a boat. It was 5 p.m. The ferryman had left the dock earlier to help some children at a nearby school and decided to check back afterwards to see if any hikers were waiting.
Just the biggest feeling of relief.
Turned out he was so nice.
So nice.
We had heard how he's a stickler for time. We had decided he was a huge asshole, and then he showed up and he was so nice.
West Coast Trail, whenever we figure out a surprise.
Within 30 minutes, victory had been stolen from us, but only long enough so that we could truly appreciate it. As we arrived on the other shore, another surprise awaited us. The shuttle back to Victoria was still there. It was behind schedule because of a new driver. luck again.
What stands out in my head and eradicates everything else is the fact that we made the ferry. I had forgotten this.
Yeah, because this driver's like apologizing because he's running so late, and everybody else is like grumpy and mad at him. And you and I are like so thankful because this dude is still there, and we're not going to have to wait 2 days to get back to Victoria. As we unloaded the bus in Victoria, some familiar voices called out to us. We had often wondered about the fate of the two couples we had shared the first night with. Here they were, coincidentally passing the bus depot just as we had arrived. The West Coast Trail was still surprising us even hours after we left it. When I think back to the wretched weather we had on the trail, I am thankful. Others have done this trail and been welcomed with a week of sunshine and good times.
It's still to this day one of the most challenging things I've been through physically and mentally.
But I can't help but think Steven and I gained so much more.
Because I overcame that, it told me without a doubt that I could always overcome it in the future.
Because nature pushed us nearly to our breaking points and taught us lessons you can't learn elsewhere.
I think I've been more confident ever since the West Coast Trail. There's something private inside of me, this feeling of being personally tested. Yeah, you were really important, Jason, in how you helped me pull through, but I still had to do the work. And I still had to show myself that I could get through it. That may be the great value of being outside, of getting outside, right? That the hope is that you encounter a true and fundamental version of yourself that you can use as a great source of power in your everyday life too, because you know yourself better.
I've seen the mighty ocean slap the rugged shore. I've seen the seagull flying and watched the eagle soar. I've heard the wind blowing among the balsam fir, knowing this is part of Canada and I'm a part of her.